If you love a good local ghost story, you're going to want to hear from our next guest. John Boyanoski has written 2 books, including Ghosts of Upstate South Carolina, followed by More Ghosts of Upstate South Carolina as the second book. Welcome, glad you're here.
Thank you for having me, Margaret.
You're a former journalist, you're the president of Complete PR, so you like a well-told story. Why ghost stories? What's appealing?
So I grew up hearing ghost stories. I'm from Pennsylvania. My family told these stories all the time. Loved hearing them, loved watching scary movies as a kid. And so I'd travel, I'd go places, I'd pick up a local ghost book.
Yeah.
And so I moved to Greenville back in 1999, 2000. There was no ghost book. I said, well, that's interesting. And people would say, well, we're Greenville. We don't believe in ghosts. That's a Charleston thing. Then I wrote an article for the newspaper one time, and a publisher saw it and says, hey, can you turn that into a book? And that's how the book started. I started going around tracking down stories. This is before we had TAPS and Paranormal Nation. And people didn't like talking about ghost stories. So it was kind of a strange thing, asking people like, hey, do you know a ghost story? And so, but people started talking to me about them. So.
And you're out there kind of on a fact-finding mission. There's always a mix of legend, a list of historical data, but you could uncover all that. One site considered to be Greenville County's most famous location for ghostly encounters is Poinsett Bridge. What did you learn from your research there?
Poinsett Bridge is a fascinating one because it's always a story, you know, people died during the construction of it and they buried the bodies there.
Yeah,
now, that sounds like every haunted ghost story you've ever heard. And so I don't know the true story. I've heard everything, you know, there's an Indian burial ground there. The legends are tough to tell, but the thing is, so many people have seen things, and that was interesting. People had pictures, photos. So hundreds of people have, you know, would share stories, and after the books came out, people shared more stories with me that people see things up there. There's something up there. I don't know what it is, but people have seen it. They go up there, they find it. They have their meters and all that kind of thing. So there is something happening up there. So it's one where it's like we don't know what sparked it. But for some reason, people can go up there for a long time, find these ghost stories.
Well, and you interview people and you get a feeling for this. You're probably not easily imagining that every ghost story is true.
Right, and that's what I do. So when I wrote these books, I try to find, did multiple people see this? You know, do they have other encounters? It's like, they're like, I've never seen a ghost, but all of a sudden when I was up at Poinsett Bridge and I saw something. Yeah. Trying to find people who, not to say that, people who just is a ghost story, who feels sensitive to those kinds of things. So
well,
yes.
And up there, they talk about the orbs, the reports of strange noises. Anything that you sensed?
No.
I mean, you're just there to learn.
So I will clarify real quickly. I'm a chicken.
Okay.
If it says go at midnight, I'm there at 12 noon. I don't want to see anything. I don't want to hear it. I like telling the story of it. I'm not really interested in seeing it, but there are you can see how you walk these places, especially when it's no one's out there. You get a little scared. Every crack, everything in the woods it gets scary. So.
I like that, but you can compile the stories and things that people have seen and known. One favorite ghost story out of Spartanburg. This has to do with the tale of Booger Jim, a headless man who roams the train tracks, and this isn't just legend to keep the kids off the train tracks?
And so, well, here's what's fascinating about this. When I first wrote my book, I was like, I saw a little snippet, Booger Jim, headless man on the ghost tracks. Like, oh my gosh, this is the great mother story of get off the tracks at night. But after I wrote my book, a firefighter from the city of Spartanburg approached me and he says, there's actually truth to that story. And he showed me the records where a man did lose his head on the railroad tracks in the 1930s. So you can see how the story went from get away from the tracks or get up like old Jim to now he's a ghost haunting the tracks. So there's an origin story that's very real for that one. And it's interesting because there's a Booger Jim Bridge in Gaffney, totally different, but the one in Spartanburg does have an origin story of a man named Jim who lost his head on the tracks.
How many guys with that nickname do we have around here?
It's an amazing one, so.
Yeah, that's great. And I know that for you, you're passionate about a well-told story anyway. What do you love about compiling all this for people in book form?
So what I love about it is just being able to share the history of the area. Yeah. And it was a way to kind of, there's so many people, again, Greenville didn't talk about ghost stories. The Upstate didn't talk about its ghost stories. So it's kind of fun to untap a market. And, when I did my first ever book signing, I was very naive. I went in and I saw people lined up. And I'm like, what are they here for? And I realized, oh my gosh, they're here for me. But every one of them had a ghost story.
And they wanted to tell you about the ghost story.
They finally had someone they could tell and say, let me talk to you.
Keep those coming. Well, then we've got more ghost stories to talk with you about, including hauntings in the town of Abbeville. You say this place is just extensive history of spooky stories. So we're going to take a break and get more spooky upstate stories right here on Access Carolina after this.